Well, hello, beautiful internet people. Welcome back to Trauma Talk, where we talk about life in the aftermath of trauma. Today we're going to be talking about sharing your story with specifically family, but also friends. I did make the decision pretty early on that I was going to tell my family that I had been sexually assaulted, and I actually told a lot of my friends as well, my close friends. And there were a lot of things that I wish I had known starting out that I'd love to share with you guys today. So if you've gone through something traumatic and you think you might want to talk to people in your life about it, here's what I did and here's what I know now that I wish I would have known then. Everyone's journey and process is different. So first, let me start by saying you are under no obligation to tell anyone anything. Your story is your own. As you are entering into any conversation, please try to remember, if you can, that you do not owe anyone any details. However much you want to share with someone, do that. They don't have a right to push you for details, and if they do, you're welcome to say, no, I'm not comfortable sharing that. I think there were points in my journey where I felt like I owed people different things when I didn't. You know, my story is my own, the end. And if I want to share with someone the very particular details of everything that happened and kind of like the play-by-play, I can do that. But that's also sometimes really re-traumatizing to do, especially if you aren't far out from the event or if you haven't done a lot of processing around it. So please remember, you are allowed to say exactly how much you want to say, and that's it. So I did tell my brother the night that I was sexually assaulted because I was a wreck, and I didn't know what happened, even though like I did know what happened. And he drove 5 hours in the middle of the night when he was really sick to come spend a couple days with me. That sort of set off the alarm bell in my family. They're like, hey, something's wrong here. So my mom and my dad knew something had happened, but they didn't know what. And it took me a little while to tell them. I did eventually tell them. I first told my dad. I told him very brushstroke details. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I never expressed the gravity of what I had gone through because I was still trying to process it. I was still trying to take it in. I was in shock, you know? I think all I said was something along the lines of, I didn't want to go too far with him sexually and he pushed me too far, or something like that, which is horrible for a father to hear. But that's not the same as saying that I was in an abusive relationship for 11 months with a sociopath who repeatedly raped me. Like, there's a big difference there. We'll come back to a piece of that in just a second, but again, that's totally fine. Whatever I wanted to tell him was fine. So I told him very, very vague, basic details, you know, something bad happened to me. And then because my brother knew and my dad knew, I wanted to tell my mom. And I invited her over and we sat down, and that was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I remember my entire body being cold. I was like cold and shaking, even though the temperature was perfectly fine because I was so scared. We don't know what people's reactions are gonna be. So if you're thinking about talking to someone, I understand that that might be a fear for you. One thing that has helped me when I've been debating telling someone or not is thinking about how they've responded to similar topics in the past. Like if it came up in a movie, what kind of comments did they make or not make? Or if there was, you know, a friend who went through something similar or a news story, did they tend to be supportive and understanding, or were they like, you know, victim blaming or whatever? Things like that were good for me to keep in mind, to try to keep some context and have an idea of how people might respond. But even then, you don't ever really know. You don't ever know how someone's going to take your story. And so I was really scared to tell my mom. But when I told her, I asked her, if I remember correctly, this was almost 9 years ago now, to just listen. I wanted to express what had happened without being interrupted because I was so scared. If you're going to have a conversation, share your story, something I would highly recommend is setting the stage by expressing your expectations. So if you want to talk and then not be interrupted until the very end, let that person know and make sure that they're on board with that so that you know what to expect. If you can kind of set the stage for how you want this conversation to go, that can be helpful because then you know a little bit of what to expect. So I asked my mom to just listen. I told her the story, I told her I was done, and then she had time to respond, and she did respond in a very loving and compassionate manner. But something that I have realized in the years following this is that all of my family members had no idea how serious things were. Because I was so prone to minimize things, I was already blaming myself for everything that happened. I was in such a vulnerable, messed up state that what I expressed to them was a fraction, like I said, just a fraction of what had really occurred. And I never went back and corrected that. So as I have begun public speaking and this channel and all of that, things have come out that have been a surprise to them, which I kind of feel bad for. I wish that I would have taken the time in subsequent years as I processed through my own story, as I got to better places where I felt more comfortable talking about things, to take some time and say, hey, I think I told you just a tiny little piece. I think I was minimizing things, and I want you to know more of what I've gone through so you'll understand my reactions. And that is a conversation I've had in later years, but I wish I would have had it sooner. Share whatever you feel comfortable sharing, but something that was important for me to remember looking back is that I thought I told them so much more than I had told them, because so much was going on in my head. What I thought I said was like all kinds of gritty, gory, horrible details, but all I really said was like, I said no and he did something anyways, the end, you know, because I wanted to be out of that conversation. So with all that being said, once you've told your story, it's been so difficult for me to deal with people's responses sometimes. Because the reality is that some people will be super understanding and supportive and caring, and some people won't be. And the reality is that some people just don't have the education. They are simply ignorant when it comes to trauma. So if someone responds in a way that is hurtful or not understanding, or says something that is just not what you need to hear, what I would recommend, if this is a relationship that matters to you, that you want to, you know, keep alive, that you want them to be a part of this part of your story, is to send them resources. Keep that line of communication open. Let them know when you are willing and able that, you know, what they said wasn't helpful, and here's why it wasn't helpful, and here are some resources, because there are absolutely resources out there, and it's not on you to explain everything. I felt like that for a while. I felt like it was absolutely on me, where I had to explain every detail of like my symptoms and how I was responding to things, because I was dealing really heavily with PTSD. Something I wish I would have done is rely more heavily on sending resources instead of feeling like I had to put everything into words, because it was exhausting to try to put things into words. And my dogs are walking around and making crazy noises. Sorry if you heard that in the background, but with the limited amount of energy I had, it was exhausting to try to use that to explain things to people. So if you can, utilize books, utilize websites, utilize articles, utilize, you know, videos like I have on my channel to send to them to help them to understand better what you might be dealing with. The last thing that I would say is have support in place if you are considering having this kind of a conversation, and especially if you don't know what kind of response they're gonna have, especially if this is a person who is important in your life. If you are in therapy, talk to your therapist about this conversation. Have them help you get ready for it. If you aren't, I would absolutely consider seeing a trauma-informed therapist. Or if therapy isn't accessible or isn't your thing, is there a local support group? Is there an online support group? Are there people who have gone through similar things that you could talk to and connect with, so that no matter what the reaction is, you know you have support at the end of the day? One of the most monumental things to remember, and I feel like I've said that with a lot of the things here, but is to remember that other people's reactions are not on you. How people respond to our stories and what we're telling them, their reactions are based on a lifetime of experiences, just like ours are. And so once you've told them something, if they respond in a way that isn't awesome, that's not your fault. Talk to them about it, express it to them, but understand that other people's reactions are not on you to manage and to control. That takes unnecessary time and energy and isn't on you anyways. I hope some of this was helpful, guys. If you do decide to tell your family or your friends, best of luck. It takes a lot of courage. I know that's hard to do, and I am rooting for you. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Please don't forget to hit subscribe if you care about topics like life in the aftermath of trauma and dealing with PTSD and depression and mental health and all of that. We talk about things like that really often on this channel, and I look forward to seeing you here in the future. I love you guys. I'm thinking of you, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.